Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Palette of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to Warhammer 40k Combat Patrol. Now, as per usual with all these videos, if you like them, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and of course, drop a comment down below. I love hearing back from you guys. It goes a massive way to helping out the channel too. Now, this week we're on issue number 7 of Combat Patrol magazine, and it is part 1 of 2 of our good old Tyrannid Termagants. So we get, some minis. We will get the rest next week. Obviously, these also come with Ripper Swarms. If you watched the video I did last week, going all the way up to issue 20, it is a different version of the Termagants. Don't worry about it. They just have one weapon type instead of a multiple weapon types. Genuinely, not something to really care about. But if you want to get extra Termagants or anything like that, you can do. Obviously, you can buy multiple copies of the issues. You can buy them in the box if you really want to from good old GW. Entirely up to you. Over the course of the magazine, we do get 20. So we get the 1 and 2 this time round in the shape of issue 7 and 8. We will get also the same again in issues, I think it's 15 and 16 or 16 and 17, something like that. You'll find out if you watch last week's video. Anyway, you'll get them again. But yeah, really cool. I do quite like the Termagants. They're pretty nifty. They're pretty different. Kind of part of me, though, does wish that we had Termagants and Hormagants. But obviously, because it's from the Combat Patrol box, they're never going to give us that. But really cool stuff. The other thing that we get this week, though, is a measuring guide. Now, this is essentially just a clear, plastic, flimsy ruler. Yeah, it's a basic measuring tool. Really, I don't know how else to describe it. You got them with Imperium magazine, you got them with Conquest, you got them with Mortal Realms, you got them with Stormbringer. You get them with this magazine. It's only a 12-inch kind of clear plastic rule. Obviously, because the whole game is all to do with movement and shooting range and stuff like that, you do need these. However, if you want something that's a little bit better than this flimsy bit of plastic, get yourself a tape measure. Far easier, far better, and they're cheap. You don't have to buy the GW one, which is, I don't know, stupid price probably. You don't have to buy an Army Painter one. You can just go to your local B&M, pick up a tape measure, and away you go. It'll last you years if you treat it right. If you're pulling it out and swinging it around by the tape measure itself, it'll break. But otherwise, tape measure's easier. It is what it is. Anywho, going into this week's issue, we're first greeted by the build guide. Obviously, this gives the build guide for all 10 Termagants and the Ripper Swarm. So it's for this issue and next week's issue. So it's up to you if you want to build them all now, or if you want to build what you can now, or if you want to build them all next week. Personally, I'm probably going to wait until next week and build them all then. I mean, I've already built my Barb Gaunts, but I don't feel like I need to build the Termagants just yet, because it's far easier to spray paint them, and the weather's not right for spray painting. In all honesty, I don't have a garage, so that will get ignored for a while until I can spray paint them next year probably. Anyway, fairly straightforward, fairly easy. You're not going to have a problem. Genuinely straightforward, simple. Moving on, though, we get a read section. So the Angels of Death. So the Space Marines are more than warriors. They are a symbol of the Imperium's might, and are revered and feared across the Imperium as bringers of holy wrath. The Imperium is vast, and the Space Marines, elite as they are, cannot be everywhere at once. However, the legend of a Space Marine is found in every corner of the Imperium. Factory workers trudge to their shift beneath vast statues of great Space Marine heroes, while on the front lines, soldiers pray that the Space Marines will join them in battle. When the Space Marines do appear, Imperial citizens are awestruck. They treat every Space Marine as a godlike being, picking up spent bolter casings, as holy relics and fighting even harder when the Adeptus Astartes are close. So, the best way to kind of describe the Space Marines, if you're an Age of Sigmar player like myself, they're the Stormcast Eternals. So, the poster boy for Age of Sigmar is the Stormcast Eternals, the poster boy for Warhammer 40k is the Space Marine. So, they have they have a lot of similarities in a lot of ways. So, they are few and far between, but they are an elite fighting force. So, the Stormcast are very, very elite fighters. With the Space Marines, they're elite fighters. The Space Marines are bigger than normal humans. The Stormcast are bigger than normal humans. If a Stormcast dies, their soul travels back to Azir and they get reforged. If a Space Marine dies, a good old apothecary may wish to collect their gene seed, and then that can be implanted into a new Space Marine later on. So it kind of carries on bringing them about. And that's how they kind of work in a roundabout way, in a very loose way of putting it anyway. But yeah, so they're kind of seen in the same light. So the equivalent of each other, really. So for instance, like the Necrons are the equivalent of the undead in good old Age of Sigmar, in a lot of ways. So, pretty cool though. I'm always a bit hit and miss with Space Marines, but I do kind of like them, they're alright. They're just a bit generic. You get a bit more information about the idea of a lightning strike, so they do come down and they do kind of land in their drop pods and orbital attacks, craft and such like, that can deliver warriors into the heart of a beleaguered war zone. And once there, the Space Marines launch brutal decapitation strikes that leave an entire enemy force reeling and unable to respond. And they do utilise the combined arms kind of idea, so they do have a kind of a, what's the best way to describe it? Probably a pantheon in a roundabout way. So they are allies and treaties and such like that. So they're other parts of humanity in the Imperium of Man. So the Astra Militarum, the Adeptus Sororitas, the good old Adeptus Mechanicus are all parts of the same team, and sometimes will be joined by Space Marines, and they link up and fight as one and such like that on occasions. Moving on though, we get more information about the Hive Mind and the Tyranids. So, every Tyranid is joined by the Hive Mind. The Hive Mind is a vast, unknowable swarm intelligence that allows the Tyranids to act with terrifying coordination in battle. The Hive Mind is beyond human comprehension. None know how vast it really is or what it wants. However, its powers are evident to all who battle the Tyranids. Every Tyranid is an extension of the Hive Mind's will. You could picture the swarm as a single vast beast, where warrior organisms such as Termagants and Von Ryan's Leapers act as its teeth and claws, while psychic synapse organisms act as its brain. So, there are different ways to look at the Hive Mind. So the Hive Mind is a kind of, technically the Necrons work on a Hive Mind in a roundabout way, but it's a kind of roughly. The undead, so like for instance your good old Deadwalker zombies and your dead rattle skeletons in the Age of Sigmar all work like a hive mind. They all work as one, and there are beings who control them and enhance control over them and such like that, and that's how they generally work. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Yeah, I'm not going to try and go into any other analogies with them. They do have an unknowable presence, so the exact nature of the hive mind is completely a mystery to humanity. Some claim that its alien sentience is a god, while others maintain it is a collective intelligence or psychic presence. In truth, it is so alien as to be unknowable. It cannot be understood or reasoned with. And they do utilise a coordinated assault, so Tyranid force can act as a single predatory entity. Commands are relayed instinctively and instantly, allowing the swarm to react with dizzying speeds to anything the enemy throws at it. So, that kind of thing can be seen in Space Marine 2, for instance. So, the way the swarm works and bends and kind of flows in certain battles is how that's meant to work, essentially. The other thing with Tyranids, you do get synapse organisms. So certain organisms, certain Tyranid units, amplify the hive mind. So synapse organisms broadcast the indomitable will of a hive mind across Tyranid swarms. From hovering zoanthropes to swift Tyranid primes and towering hive tyrants, synapse creatures can be found wherever the Tyranids attack. In their presence, even the lowliest bioforms fight with a ruthless ferocity. So, the synapse organisms, if you're utilising them, if they're within a certain range of certain units, some of them have an ability that they can kind of amplify the will, so they will fight harder and such like that, and fight more determinedly against the enemy and such like. So, pretty cool, pretty interesting. And a bit of an example over certain monstrosities that have this synaptic link are the Neurotyrant, the Tervagon, and the Tyranid Warrior as kind of your basic examples. So, pretty cool. I'm not going to lie, I like that mini. I think it's really cool. Don't know if I'd buy one because I'm not a Tyranid player, but I do like that mini. Yeah, happy days. Moving on though, we get some fiction for good old Warhammer 40k. So Decapitation. I'm not going to read it to you. Read it yourself. You can have a bit of fun with it. Give them all your own voices, for instance, if you wanted to. But pretty cool. We do get some really, really good fiction with all of these magazines. So if you picked up Stormbringer, you had some really good ones in there. Same with Mortal Realms. Same with Imperium, we had some pretty decent ones in there as well. Conquest I didn't pick up, so I don't know about that, but I imagine it was exactly the same, and you got some really good units and some good stories that all linked together. The way this one will work, though, I imagine we're going to get a bit of stories depending on each faction. So we have Tyranids and Space Marines. We will get, I'm imagining we're going to get something to do with the Eldari and Chaos. We're going to get stuff to do with the Votan Orcs and such like, and so on, and so on, and so on. In theory. I may be wrong. But otherwise, pretty cool stuff. Moving on, though, we get information. So this is your basic rules for movement and measuring. So, utilising the, rubbish ruler that I've thrown around the room, apparently, you will be utilising these to kind of measure your distance. So certain things have certain attack ranges. So generally for melee, you need to be within a very, very short distance. For range, for anything with range, so like firepower and such like that, you will have certain stats for different weapons that may include giving us a bit more information. Everything has its own movement as well, though. So for instance, your Furnace squad has a movement range of 6 inches. They will have an actual weapon range, so each weapon stat itself will have its own range, which we get more information about that later on, I believe, because it's all part of how units move and how units fire and stuff like that. So if everything's within certain ranges, it all works perfectly. So pretty cool, pretty straightforward. You will learn more as we go on. So obviously the way the magazine works, it gives us essentially all the basic rules that you'd get in the core rulebook, and we will also get advanced rules as well as individual rules for individual factions. So certain factions have certain different rules. So we will see a lot of that throughout the course of this magazine's run. So definitely worth looking into if you're a new player. If you're an old hand, you may not be that interested in this because you already generally know all of it. However, if you've not played the newest edition of 40k, you may want to brush up on your skills or brush up on your knowledge or find an easy way to break it down for teaching somebody new to play. Your choice, but this magazine does a very, very good job of it. If you've never played before, the magazines give you a very, very simplified understanding of how to play and how to go about doing it. So it's worth looking into, worth keeping an eye on for it, if you're going to be collecting the whole lot anyway. Then we move on, we've got our scenario, so Waking the Swarm. So we've got Barb Gaunts, a couple of the Tyranid terrain, and the Aryan Furnace Marines facing off against each other on different corners of the map. Smash them together, have a bit of fun, killy, nice stuff. Going through, if you're playing it following along, you are going to be doing a lot of this. So obviously the Barb Gaunts have a shooting range. You're not really going to be moving them if you're following this, but we will at some point later on. So, pretty cool, pretty interesting. And obviously you got your different victory conditions. Play it through a few times to get a really good understanding of how it all works. Later on, the missions are going to get more more interpretive to how you want to do it. So you can pick this faction, or you can pick this faction. Some of them we might even get, have fun with it, multiplayer game, enjoy. Moving on though, going into next week, obviously next week the rest of our termagants, so part 2 of 2, and we'll get a bit more information about how to charge into combat and such like that, and we're also going to get more information about the second Tyrannic War. Issue number 9 is a paint issue. So paint issues aren't always the greatest in terms of value for money. It's not that valuable, but you do get really good things. So if you're new, this is up your alley. So Abaddon Black and Retributor Armor. Retributor Armor is obviously gold. So if that focuses quite nicely, you'll see that I have used Retributor Armor on the trim of the pauldrons and the Aquila on the chest of our good old Space Marine. I also used Abaddon Black on that mini as well. So the Abaddon Black is in between the armor panels itself, and where it's kind of more cloth, and where you wouldn't have armor covering the inside of a joint or anything like that, or the armpits area of your Space Marine. You will use these colours in other minis as well. So you will use them on the Astra Militarum, you'll use them probably on the Leagues of Votan and others. So you are going to be using these. Obviously, don't waste them. Make sure you're sealing your pots up as nice and neat as possible. If you need extra paints, you can order it online through Element Games or Wayland Games or anyone like that, or you can go into your local GW store and buy them there. Or if you've got a local game store, you can get them from there. Some of them do them cheaper than Warhammer, so it's worth a look around. Or you can buy third-party paints. So, for instance, you can buy things like the good old Duncan Rhodes 2-thin coat paints. You've got good old Green Stuff World. You've got loads of other companies. So it's worth shopping around, finding the right paint company for you. I do use a lot of Citadel personally, but I use a few others, as you can tell. So it's worth having a nose around, find the right ones. Anywho, I have rambled on more than long enough. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will see you sometime soon. Bye-bye now.